The sound of a single raindrop echoed through the empty alley, barely audible over the hum of the city, yet it was a reminder that life, no matter how uncertain, went on. The cold streets of Elyris were a stark contrast to the warmth inside the glowing buildings, where people went about their lives, oblivious to the forces conspiring just beneath the surface. In a small, dimly lit room on the top floor of a high-rise, a man sat by a window, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the glass. His name, or what he had come to be known as here, was Lucian Elyra. To the world, he was a successful entrepreneur, an influential figure in the high-tech industry, a man of charm, wit, and undeniable appeal. But Lucian Elyra was not what he appeared to be. He was not even human. The truth was that Lucian Elyra wasn't a man at all, nor was he even from this planet. He was an alien infiltrator, one of the most sophisticated agents of a race whose goal was simple: infiltrate Earth, study its inhabitants, and manipulate them for a purpose that even Lucian was uncertain about. His species, the Zhoron, had been in the shadows for centuries, coming to Earth in secret, using their advanced shape-shifting abilities to assume human forms and embed themselves in society. Lucian had been sent here nearly 2 years ago, but his mission had evolved far beyond its original objectives. Initially, he was to gather intelligence, observe humanity's weaknesses, and prepare the groundwork for his species' eventual takeover. But as time passed, Lucian began to notice something that complicated his mission. It was the humans themselves, their emotions, their complexity, their unpredictable nature. The Zhoron had studied human psychology, but they had never truly understood it. They were beings of logic, calculation, and cold rationality, whereas humans were driven by desires, fears, and impulses. It fascinated him. At first, it was a distraction. Then, it became a puzzle he couldn't resist solving. And now, it had become his obsession. Tonight, something felt different. Lucian stood and turned away from the window, feeling the familiar weight of his disguise settle on him. His reflection in the glass was flawless: short dark hair, sharp eyes, and a chiseled jawline. But beneath the surface, everything was different. His true form was nothing like this human shell. It was an ethereal, shifting amalgamation of light and shadow, something that no human could comprehend without losing their mind. "Focus," he murmured to himself, shaking off the disorienting thought of his true nature. "You're here for a reason." The sound of a doorbell broke the silence. Lucian's hand hesitated above his desk before he reached for the sleek, metallic communication device. He tapped the screen, and an image of a young woman appeared. "Mr. Hale, there's a meeting waiting for you downstairs. Your presence is requested." Lucian's eyes narrowed. A meeting? That wasn't in his schedule. His interest peaked. He stepped away from the desk and moved toward the elevator, every movement purposeful, calculated. He didn't trust these sudden, unannounced meetings. But something about this particular one felt important. His instincts, something he had never before trusted, something human, were tingling, urging him to go. The elevator doors closed, and the descent began. The city lights below blurred into streaks of color as the elevator descended into the depths of the building. Lucian's mind raced with possibilities. Who could it be? Another human player trying to exploit his position, perhaps? Or was it something more? He had learned, in his time here, that nothing was ever as it seemed. When the elevator stopped, the doors opened to reveal a lobby bathed in soft, golden light. There, standing at the center of the room, was a figure cloaked in shadow, their features obscured by the hood of a dark robe. Lucian's heart, or whatever passed for it, skipped a beat. "Mr. Hale," the figure said, voice soft but unmistakably confident. "I think it's time we have a conversation." Lucian's instincts told him that this conversation would change everything. Lucian stepped out of the elevator, his gaze never leaving the cloaked figure in the center of the room. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an energy he couldn't quite place. The figure remained still, their hands folded beneath the cloak, as if waiting for him to make the next move. "Who are you?" Lucian asked, his voice measured and calm. betraying no hint of the unease that simmered beneath the surface. His thoughts raced. The Zhoron had never encountered a threat like this. Someone who would dare summon him so boldly, without the slightest hint of fear. The figure shifted slightly, the movement too fluid to be human. The cloak rippled as though it were alive, and the faintest glow emanated from beneath the fabric. Slowly, the hood fell back, revealing a face that made Lucian's breath catch in his chest. It was a woman, or at least, it looked like one. But her features were unnervingly perfect, too symmetrical, too flawless. Her skin shimmered with an almost ethereal sheen, the color of moonlight on a clear night, and her eyes, they were the deepest shade of violet, almost unnatural in their intensity. There was something in her gaze that unnerved him, something ancient, ancient beyond the reckoning of the human mind. "I am known as Elyra," she said, her voice soft but rich, with a cadence that seemed to resonate with something deep inside of him. "And I know who you truly are." Lucian hailed. He froze. The name, the one he had carefully chosen when he first assumed this human form, was something he had used to blend in, to disappear. But Elyra knew it wasn't his real name. She knew exactly what he was. "How?" Lucian began, but the words caught in his throat. He had perfected the art of hiding his true nature, of masking his alien essence under layers of carefully crafted behavior. He had been careful, so careful. How could she possibly know? Elyra smiled, a slight, knowing curve of her lips. "You were not as careful as you think. I see through all the layers you have built around yourself. You might have fooled them." She gestured vaguely toward the outside world, "but not me." Lucian's mind raced. She was no ordinary human. Could she be another infiltrator? Another alien? He felt a pang of suspicion. The Zhoron had trained him to be wary, to question everything and everyone. But something about her, her calm demeanor, her presence, made him hesitate. She wasn't threatening in the traditional sense. She wasn't making any overt moves, only speaking, watching, waiting. "You are not human," he finally said, the statement falling from his lips with a quiet certainty. Elyra's eyes sparkled with a flicker of amusement. "Correct," she said simply. "But neither am I like you, Lucian. I am not one of your kind. I am something else entirely. And I have come to offer you a choice." "A choice?" Lucian echoed, his mind reeling. He had infiltrated humanity for a purpose, and that purpose, his mission, had always been clear. What possible choice could this mysterious figure present him with that would even make sense? Elyra took a step forward, her movements graceful, as if she were gliding through water. "You came here with one agenda, Lucian. But what if I told you that the true purpose of your mission has been manipulated? That what you think you redoing for your people may not be the whole truth?" Lucian's mind flashed with images of his time on Earth, his interactions with humans, his observations, his quiet manipulations. It had all been so straightforward, so simple. He had been gathering information, identifying weaknesses, pushing humanity ever so subtly toward the precipice. But now, hearing Elyra's words, something in him stirred. Doubt, uncertainty. Was there more to it? Was there something he had missed? "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice low, the tone betraying his unease. Elyra's smile widened, but it was no longer a smile of amusement. It was something darker, more knowing. "I'm saying that you are part of a larger game. A game you don't fully understand, Lucian. And you are not the only player. There are those who have orchestrated everything, including your mission. But their goals are not what you think. The true nature of your kind's presence here on Earth, it's far more complex. You've been used, Lucian. You've been manipulated, just like everyone else." A chill crawled down Lucian's spine. He had heard rumors, whispers, of an even greater power behind the Zhoron, of unseen forces pulling the strings. But he had dismissed them, never allowing the possibility to surface. To hear it now, spoken so plainly, felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. "You're lying," he said, though the conviction in his voice was lacking. Deep inside, a part of him was already questioning the truth of her words. Elyra's eyes softened, and she took another step forward. I don't expect you to believe me, not yet. But the truth will be revealed to you soon enough. And when it is, you will have to choose, Lucian. Will you continue down the path you've been set on? Or will you join me in stopping the true enemy before it's too late? Lucian stood there, frozen, as the weight of her words settled over him. He could feel the tension in the room, the heat of the moment closing in around him. For the first time since his arrival on Earth, he was uncertain. Was he the puppet, or the puppet master? Elyra's voice broke the silence once more. Time is running out. You have been given your mission. But now I am giving you the opportunity to change it. Choose wisely. The room seemed to pulse with energy. The quiet hum of the city outside growing distant, muffled by the storm that had begun to rage beyond the walls. And in that moment, Lucian realized that whatever decision he made next would alter everything. The course of his mission, the fate of humanity, and perhaps, even the fate of the universe itself. And the most terrifying part? He had no idea which choice was the right one. Lucian's mind was a storm of confusion, swirling with thoughts, doubts, and questions he had never expected to face. Elyra stood before him, unwavering, her violet eyes locked on his with a weight that seemed to penetrate beyond the surface. The room felt smaller, as though the walls themselves were closing in, pressing him into a corner where there was no escape from the choice she had laid before him. For the first time in his existence, Lucian felt the sting of uncertainty. His mission had been clear: infiltrate Earth, gather intelligence, manipulate key players, and pave the way for the Zhoron to seize control. He had embraced that purpose, detached from the emotions and complications of the humans around him. But Elyra's words shattered that simplicity. She was offering him a choice, but not just any choice, one that would rip through the very fabric of everything he had believed in. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. His pulse quickened as he tried to calculate the consequences of every possible outcome. Could Elyra be telling the truth? Could the Zhoron, the species that had entrusted him with this mission, be lying to him? He had trusted them for years. They had been his people, his family, his purpose. And now, this woman, this enigmatic being, was suggesting that everything he had done might have been a lie. Why should I trust you? Lucian asked, his voice strained, fighting to maintain his composure. I don't even know who you are. I don't know what you want. Elyra's lips curled into a faint smile, as though she had anticipated the question. I'm not asking you to trust me, Lucian. I'm asking you to trust the truth. Look around you. Ask yourself, have you ever truly felt at home here? Among these humans, among your own kind? She gestured to the world beyond the walls of the high-rise, to the sprawling city that had been his stage, his playground. He hesitated. The humans. He had studied them, manipulated them, become one of them in a way that had started to feel natural. He had grown to admire their resilience, their spirit. The complexity of their emotions had both intrigued and frustrated him, but it was undeniable. There was a beauty to it. A chaos he could never quite control. A chaos he had never expected to care about. The Zhoron have a purpose, Lucian said, his voice growing more resolute, though it wavered slightly as doubt crept in. We were sent here for a reason. To prepare Earth for what's to come. You want me to turn my back on that? Elyra's expression softened, but there was no pity in her gaze. Only understanding. Your people, the Zhoron, have been preparing for something far worse than you know. They aren't just looking to control Earth. They are here to destroy it. And when that happens, they will not spare you, Lucian. They will not spare anyone. The words landed like a blow, and Lucian staggered back, his mind reeling. The Zhoron had always been methodical, patient, strategic. He had never questioned their motives because he believed in their vision. He believed in the promise of a future where his species would thrive. But Elyra's words threatened everything. Why would they destroy Earth? He whispered, almost to himself. Because they see Earth as a threat, Elyra replied, her voice low but steady. A threat to their dominance, to their very existence. Your species has been studying humanity for centuries, and you know what you've learned. Humans are capable of far more than your people realize. You think you understand them, but the truth is, you fear them. And fear breeds destruction. Lucian shook his head. That's not true. We've only come to study, to learn. Study? Elyra interrupted, her voice sharp. You've been manipulating them for your own gain. You've shaped their societies, their governments, their technologies, all in preparation for the Zhoron's arrival. But you never considered the possibility that the humans might fight back, might evolve beyond what you anticipated. That is the true purpose of your mission, isn't it? To keep them complacent, to make sure they don't awaken to their potential? Lucian clenched his fists, the pressure of her words building within him. Everything he had believed in was being pulled apart, piece by piece, and he could feel the edges of his certainty unraveling. Could it be true? Could the Zhoron be manipulating him too? Elyra stepped closer, her voice soft but insistent. You've seen glimpses of it, Lucian. The humans have begun to change. The way they think, the way they communicate, the way they fight for something more than survival. You've seen it in their leaders, their revolutionaries, their thinkers. And you've seen it in yourself. Her words cut deep, striking a chord he hadn't realized was there. For the first time, Lucian could feel the pull of something inside him, something human. He had become entangled in their world, their emotions, their drive. The line between observer and participant had blurred, and he no longer knew which side of the equation he stood on. I was never meant to care about them, he muttered, almost to himself. No, Elyra said, her voice gentle but firm. You were never meant to care. But you do, Lucian. And that's why you're standing here, questioning everything you've ever known. That's why you're still listening. Lucian took a step back, running a hand through his hair. If what you're saying is true, then what am I supposed to do? The Zhoron will come. If I turn against them now, if I abandon my mission. You have the power to stop them, Elyra interjected. You have the knowledge, the skills. You can awaken the humans to their true potential. You can unite them against the Zhoron. But only if you choose to. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The weight of her words settled like a dense fog in Lucian's mind. There was no going back from this. No easy answers. Only choices, and their consequences. Elyra's gaze softened. A flicker of something like compassion in her eyes. This is your moment, Lucian. Your chance to rewrite everything. Will you side with the destruction of Earth, or will you fight to protect it? The room felt colder now, the storm outside louder, as if the very world was holding its breath, waiting for his decision. Lucian looked at Elyra one last time, and for the first time, he felt a strange sense of clarity. Whatever path he chose, it would change everything. He could feel the weight of it, his future, the future of humanity, and the future of his own kind. There was no turning back. I need time to think, he said, his voice steady but heavy with the gravity of the decision he was about to make. Elyra nodded. Time is something we all have, but it is running out faster than you realize. With that, she turned and walked toward the door, leaving Lucian alone with his thoughts. The choice lay heavy on him now, and as he stared out into the stormy night, the question that echoed in his mind was clear. Could he truly change the course of history? Could he risk everything to protect a world he had never fully understood? Or would he let the Zhoron's vision for Earth become reality? The storm outside raged on, casting shadows that flickered across the glass walls of the high-rise. Lucian stood motionless by the window, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The city below seemed so distant now, the lights of Elyris twinkling like fireflies, oblivious to the storm that was brewing above them and the storm that was brewing inside him. Elyra's words repeated in his mind like an insistent drumbeat. You have the power to stop them. You can unite them. You can awaken them to their true potential. But the Zhoron had always been his people. His mission was their mission. His purpose was clear, even if that purpose had now become clouded with doubt. He had come to Earth with the conviction that the Zhoron were the superior race, the ones who would usher in a new era of order. He had believed in their vision. How could he turn his back on them now? He paced the room, the faint hum of the city growing louder in his ears. 1,000 thoughts surged through his mind. His people, his mission, Elyra's words, the humans he had observed, the strange pull he felt toward them. Could they really be as unpredictable as Elyra claimed? Could humanity, with all its flaws and contradictions, truly be a force worth saving? The sound of his communicator broke the silence, its low buzz pulling him back to reality. It was a message from his contact within the Zhoron ranks. Status update required. Are you prepared for the next phase of the mission? Lucian's fingers hovered over the screen. This was it. The Zhoron were preparing to make their move, the final step in their long-planned operation. If he didn't act now, if he didn't respond with the full support of his mission, everything would proceed as it had been planned. Nothing would change. But a gnawing feeling settled in his chest. Was that what he wanted? To follow through with the destruction of a planet he had grown to understand, to witness its people fight for a future they couldn't even fully comprehend? Or was Elyra right? Could he choose to break away from everything he had known, to ally himself with the humans and fight against his own kind? His fingers trembled as they hovered over the screen. For the first time in his life, Lucian didn't know what the right choice was. His training had always been clear. The Zhoron never hesitated. They acted with certainty, with absolute conviction. But now, that conviction felt hollow. He exhaled, trying to steady his racing heart. He couldn't ignore the growing sense of responsibility, the realization that the fate of the world might be in his hands. Could he really side with Elyra, a being who seemed to know more about him than he had ever known about himself? Could he turn against the Zhoron, the very people who had sent him here, who had entrusted him with this mission? Another message blinked on the screen, this one more urgent. Lucian, the countdown has begun. You have 24 hours to confirm your alignment. We expect your full participation. He stared at the screen, his mind flickering between two worlds, the cold, calculated certainty of the Zhoron, and the chaotic, unpredictable potential of humanity. His hand wavered above the screen again, but this time, he did something unexpected. With a quick motion, he shut the device off. It was as though a decision had been made, without his conscious awareness of it. The quiet in the room seemed more oppressive now, the weight of the silence pressing against his chest. There would be no easy path forward. Lucian turned toward the window again, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within. His gaze softened as he looked down at the streets of Elyra, where people moved about their lives, unaware of the forces at play above them. He saw a man in a shabby coat, huddling against the rain. A woman, her face buried in her phone, walking with a child. A young man holding the door open for an elderly woman, offering her a kind smile. Humanity, flawed, beautiful, and inexplicably complex. He had always seen them as pawns, as tools to be manipulated. But now, in this moment of quiet reflection, he wasn't so sure. There was something in the way they lived, in the way they struggled, that stirred something in him. He had watched them for so long. Perhaps, just perhaps, they had something that his people had long lost: hope. The Zhoron believed in order, in control. But perhaps, there was more to life than that. Lucian closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, he allowed himself to feel, truly feel. The fear, the uncertainty, the humanity of it all. It was overwhelming. When he opened his eyes again, they were clearer, stronger. The decision had been made. I can't let them destroy everything, he whispered to himself, though the words felt foreign coming from his lips. I can not after everything I've seen. And just like that, the Zhoron's hold on him shattered. Lucian turned away from the window and made his way to the door. The path ahead would not be easy. It would be dangerous, but he had made his choice. The first step was to find Elyra. Hours later, Lucian arrived at the unmarked building she had led him to earlier. His mind was set, but the weight of his decision hung heavy on his shoulders. He wasn't sure what to expect from her, but he knew he couldn't go back. The Zhoron would come for him, but now he was prepared. He would fight for humanity's future. As he stepped into the shadowed alley outside the building, he saw her, a figure in the darkness, waiting for him. "You've made your choice," Elyra said without turning around, her voice as calm as ever. Lucian nodded. "I have. You understand the consequences?" she asked, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I do," he said, his voice firm. "But I can't be part of this anymore. I won't let the Zhoron destroy everything I've come to care about." Elyra studied him for a moment, and then, for the first time, her expression softened. "Then we have much to do. The real battle is just beginning." Lucian's heart raced, but he didn't falter. His journey had only just begun. He wasn't sure where it would take him, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, silver light over the city. Lucian followed Elyra through the narrow alleyways, his footsteps barely making a sound as they moved in sync. The city, once so familiar, now felt foreign to him. The weight of his decision settled on his shoulders, and yet, with each step, he felt the pull of something greater than the cold logic of the Zhoron. It was a feeling he couldn't quite define, but it felt right. They reached a hidden door, tucked between two crumbling buildings. Elyra gestured to it with a flick of her hand, and the door creaked open, revealing a dark, quiet interior. Lucian stepped inside, and the moment he did, he felt the atmosphere shift. The air was charged with an energy he hadn't expected. This place was alive, brimming with purpose. The room they entered was large, though simple, stone walls, dim lighting, and scattered tables covered in old maps and devices that hummed softly. The walls were lined with strange artifacts, and in the center of the room, a handful of people stood huddled together, speaking in low voices. Lucian's heart skipped a beat. These were not ordinary humans. They were the ones who had begun to resist, the ones who had begun to see the truth. The revolutionaries, the ones who, against all odds, were standing up to the Zhoron without even knowing they were in danger. Elyra led him to the center of the room, where a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes turned to face them. His gaze immediately locked onto Lucian, sizing him up in a way that made Lucian feel both exposed and understood. "This is Lucian Hale," Elyra said, her voice steady. "He's made his choice. He's here to help us." The man, who Lucian now recognized as one of the key leaders of the resistance, raised an eyebrow but said nothing for a moment. Instead, he studied Lucian with an intensity that seemed to cut right through him. "So, you're the one," the man finally said, his voice thick with skepticism. "The one who's been feeding information to the Zhoron for all these years." His eyes flashed with suspicion, but there was also something else, curiosity, maybe even hope. "I was," Lucian said, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. "But no longer. I'm here now to stop them." The room went silent. The few people gathered around glanced at one another, their faces filled with disbelief. They had been fighting an invisible war, a war against an enemy they didn't fully understand. And now, a former agent of that enemy was standing before them, offering to help. The man stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Gabriel," he said, his grip firm. "And I'm not sure whether to thank you or shoot you. You've been part of the system that's been keeping us in the dark for too long. But if what you say is true, if you can help us expose the Zhoron for what they really are." His voice trailed off, as if weighing the cost of his words. Lucian took Gabriel's hand without hesitation. "I can help. I've seen enough. The Zhoron won't stop until they've taken control. I can show you how they operate, their strategies, their weaknesses. I've been among them long enough to know what they want." Elyra stepped back, watching the exchange with a quiet intensity. She hadn't told Lucian much about the resistance, only that they were his best chance of stopping the Zhoron. What they lacked in power, they made up for in resilience, and with Lucian's knowledge, they might stand a chance. Gabriel nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Then welcome to the fight, Lucian. But know this. You're not just joining us. You're putting a target on your back that the Zhoron won't miss." Once they know you're betraying them, they'll come after you. And they won't be gentle. Lucian nodded grimly. I know, but I'm prepared. Gabriel seemed to study him for a moment longer before finally stepping aside. Good. Then let's get to work. The room shifted, a sudden urgency filling the air. Lucian could feel the tension in the room. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger, much bigger. The resistance had been fighting in the shadows, gathering scraps of information, trying to understand the true nature of the threat. But now, with Lucian on their side, they had a real chance of striking back. Elyra turned to him, her gaze softening for the first time since they had met. This is only the beginning, Lucian. The Zhoron won't give up easily. They have spies, eyes everywhere. We need to move quickly if we're going to stop them. Lucian glanced around the room, taking in the faces of those who had already sacrificed so much for this cause. He could see the determination in their eyes, the hope that still flickered despite the overwhelming odds. He had always seen humanity as a collection of fragile, chaotic beings, but now he understood. This was a species capable of remarkable things, even in the face of certain doom. He turned back to Gabriel. What's the plan? Gabriel looked at him, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. We strike at the heart of their operation. We hit them where it hurts the most, by exposing their agenda. There's a data vault, a Zhoron stronghold buried deep within the human government's highest security systems. Inside, we'll find everything, their plans, their resources, their true intentions. If we can get to it and broadcast it to the world, it'll be a game changer. Lucian felt a chill run down his spine. How are we supposed to get to it? The Zhoron will have layers of protection around it. That's where you come in, Gabriel said, turning to him. You know how they think. You've been part of their systems. We need you to help us break in, to guide us through the defenses. Lucian nodded. I can do that, but it won't be easy. The Zhoron won't let anything slip without a fight. Gabriel gave him a tight smile. Then it's a good thing we're ready for one. The tension in the room had shifted, a new sense of purpose settling over the group. The resistance had just gained a powerful ally, but with that ally came new dangers. The Zhoron would be watching. They would be hunting Lucian, searching for any sign of betrayal. The clock was ticking, and every moment they waited brought them closer to discovery. But Lucian was no longer the agent of the Zhoron. He had made his choice. And now, he would fight, not for his people, but for this world. The future was uncertain. The battle ahead would be difficult. But as Lucian stood with Elyra and the resistance, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. And for the first time, he knew he was on the right side of history. The underground base hummed with activity as the resistance prepared for the most dangerous mission they had ever attempted. Lucian stood at the center of the command room, surrounded by a mix of humans, hackers, strategists, and fighters, all working together with a sense of urgency that electrified the air. The glow of screens and the sharp sounds of keyboards echoed through the room, as the final plans were set into motion. Elyra had been instrumental in gathering the intel they needed to breach the Zhoron stronghold. The data vault, buried deep within a series of fortified government buildings, was believed to be the key to the Zhoron's true intentions. If they could break in and expose the Zhoron's hidden agenda to the world, they might finally tip the scales in their favor. Lucian had always been the one operating behind the scenes, manipulating, observing, and infiltrating without ever stepping into the spotlight. But now, his role had changed. He wasn't just a spectator anymore. He was part of something much larger, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on him. He glanced over at Gabriel, who stood at the front of the room, speaking with the team's lead hacker, a woman named Mara. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes glued to the screen as she worked to decipher the complex encryption protecting the vault's access points. Beside her, another technician, Rylan, was carefully calibrating the equipment they would need to breach the Zhoron's firewalls. Lucian had never seen such coordination. These humans, these rebels, had spent years in the shadows, fighting against an enemy they couldn't fully comprehend. Yet now, with his knowledge, they were finally making a tangible strike against the heart of the Zhoron's operation. Gabriel turned to Lucian as he approached. "We're almost ready. Mara's breaking through their first layer of encryption. We'll be going in soon." Lucian nodded, his heart beating faster with each passing moment. "Once we're in, how much time do we have before the Zhoron realize what's happening?" Gabriel's expression hardened. "Not long. We're not exactly operating in a vacuum here. They've had their eye on this facility for a while now. The moment we trigger their security systems, they'll come for us. Then we move quickly," Lucian said, his voice steady, despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. "No hesitation. We get in, we get the data, and we get out." Mara looked up from her screen, her expression grim but focused. "We're in. But the real challenge is getting past their internal defenses. These aren't just regular firewalls. The Zhoron have embedded security systems that are adaptive. The deeper we go, the more we'll be triggering their security protocols. They'll have countermeasures ready." Lucian stepped closer to her, scanning the screen. He recognized the patterns. These were the same defensive systems he had once helped design, fine-tuning them for maximum effectiveness. The Zhoron had invested years into making these systems virtually impenetrable, but Lucian knew their flaws. He had built them, and now, he would tear them apart. "We need to send a signal," Lucian said, his eyes narrowing as he studied the screen. "A decoy. Something that will trigger their alert systems elsewhere, to keep their attention away from us for as long as possible." Mara's fingers hesitated on the keyboard, but after a moment, she nodded. "I can do that. It'll buy us a few minutes at least." "Good," Lucian said. "Let's make it count." As Mara worked her magic, Lucian felt a strange sense of déjà vu. He had been on the other side of operations like this before, watching as rebels scrambled to infiltrate systems they couldn't possibly understand. But now, it was his turn to lead, to fight for something larger than himself. And for the first time, he understood what it meant to be part of a cause. It wasn't just about tactics and strategy. It was about conviction. The countdown began. Gabriel's voice broke through the silence. "We move in 5. Get ready." Lucian steeled himself, his body tense with anticipation. He glanced at Elyra, who stood by the door, her eyes locked on him, her presence a silent reminder of the decision he had made. He had chosen this path. There was no turning back now. "All units ready?" Gabriel called out, his eyes scanning the room. A chorus of affirmatives filled the air. "Let's go," Gabriel ordered. They moved swiftly, each member of the team in position, their faces determined. Lucian felt the familiar rush of adrenaline flood his system. They were going to do this. They were going to change everything. The group moved through the corridors of the underground facility, their steps echoing in the cold, sterile air. They were close now, so close to the Zhoron's inner sanctum. Lucian's mind raced as he thought of the data they needed to retrieve, the Zhoron's plans, their true intentions, everything that would expose them to the world. If they succeeded, they could stop the invasion before it even started. They reached the main control room, a door reinforced with a thick layer of alien technology. Lucian stepped forward, his hand on the panel beside the door. He typed in the code that would grant them access, the same code he had once used to enter such facilities on behalf of the Zhoron. But this time, there would be no security detail to stop them. No backup plans. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dark room filled with terminals and glowing holographic displays. At the center of the room stood a massive data vault, the heart of the Zhoron's operation. Mara wasted no time, setting up her equipment to interface with the vault's systems. Lucian stood guard, his senses alert. They were running out of time. He could feel the tension building, the quiet before the storm. He knew the Zhoron were aware of their intrusion by now. The clock was ticking, and every second brought them closer to being discovered. "Almost there," Mara muttered under her breath, her fingers dancing across the console. "Just a little more time." Suddenly, the lights flickered. Lucian's heart skipped a beat. Security breach detected. A cold, mechanical voice rang out, echoing through the room. Initiating lockdown sequence. Lucian cursed under his breath. They've found us. Gabriel's voice was sharp, his command unwavering. Move, now. We need to extract that data before they lock us out. Mara worked faster, her eyes wide with determination. Just a few more seconds, come on. Lucian stepped forward, watching the door as it began to seal. His mind raced, calculating their next move. The Zhoron would send reinforcements in minutes. If they didn't escape in time, they'd be trapped. Got it, Mara shouted triumphantly. Data extracted. It's all here. Before Lucian could respond, the sound of heavy boots echoed from the hallway outside. The Zhoron soldiers were coming. Time's up, Lucian muttered. Move out, now. Gabriel's team rushed to the door, and as Lucian turned to follow, he caught a glimpse of the data flashing across the screen. The Zhoron's plans, their true intentions laid bare. The Resistance had the key to the world's survival, but now, they had to escape, alive. As the door slammed shut behind them, Lucian's pulse raced. The hardest part wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. The air was thick with tension as the Resistance team made their way through the facility's darkened corridors, the hum of the emergency lockdown sirens reverberating in their ears. Lucian's pulse raced as he moved alongside Elyra, Gabriel, Mara, and the others. Their mission was far from complete. They had secured the data, but escaping the Zhoron stronghold was a whole other battle. Every step they took now could be their last. We need to move fast, Gabriel ordered, his voice calm but strained with urgency. The Zhoron will be swarming the facility soon. We'll need to get to the extraction point before they close off the exits. Lucian glanced over his shoulder. The sound of boots pounding on metal floors echoed in the distance, growing closer by the second. He could feel the heat of the chase, the sense of being hunted. The Zhoron were ruthless, and once they realized the data had been stolen, nothing would stop them from finding and eliminating the intruders. They rounded a corner, ducking into a small maintenance room. The narrow space offered a brief respite, but not enough time to breathe easy. Lucian looked at Mara, who was still clutching the hard drive containing the stolen data like a lifeline. We have to destroy that data if we can't escape, Lucian said, his eyes locking with hers. The Zhoron can't get their hands on it. If they do, it's all over. Mara nodded grimly, her hands trembling as she set the hard drive into a portable encryption device. It's protected, but I'll need time to erase the traces. If we can make it out with it, we can use it to expose the Zhoron's entire operation. Gabriel's voice cut through the tension. We don't have time for this. If they find us in here. Before he could finish, the facility's intercom crackled, a cold mechanical voice slicing through the quiet. Intruders detected. Lockdown initiated. All exits sealed. Security teams are en route. Prepare for containment. The message sent a shiver down Lucian's spine. They were trapped. There was no longer any escape unless they fought their way out, and the odds were rapidly turning against them. The Zhoron had the advantage. They knew this facility inside and out, while the Resistance had to rely on the small amount of intel they had gathered and Lucian's knowledge of the Zhoron's methods. We need a diversion, Lucian said, his mind working on overdrive. A way to draw them away from the extraction point and buy us more time. Elyra, who had been quietly observing, nodded. I know the layout of the upper levels. There's an access shaft that leads directly to the hangar where the extraction team is waiting. But we'll need to draw the Zhoron's forces there to give them a chance to get to us. You're suggesting a decoy? Mara asked, her voice tight with nerves. That's risky. We don't even know how many Zhoron troops are in this facility right now. Risky is the only option we have, Lucian said firmly. If we stay in one place, we're sitting ducks. But if we move quickly and use the Zhoron's own tactics against them, we might just have a shot. Gabriel looked at him, weighing his words. Then he nodded. All right, Lucian, we'll follow your lead. But once we start this, there's no turning back. Lucian's mind raced. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about making sure the resistance had the chance to do what they came here to do. He knew the Zhoron would do everything in their power to protect the data they had stolen. But in doing so, they had just tipped their hand, and that could work to the resistance's advantage. He glanced at the door. The sound of Zhoron soldiers getting closer was unmistakable. "Let's move," he said, his voice resolute. "We have to get to that hangar." They sprinted through the hallways, their footsteps echoing like a drumbeat in the silent, empty corridors. Lucian led the way, following the map in his mind that he had memorized over years of covert operations. They reached a junction, and Lucian held up his hand to signal a stop. "We'll split up here," he whispered. "I'll take the left corridor and set off the security alarms. You head right and create the diversion. We'll meet at the hangar." Gabriel looked at him with a sharp, calculating gaze. "You're sure about this?" Lucian nodded. "It's the only way." Elyra gave him a brief nod, and then, without another word, the team split off into the shadows. Lucian moved swiftly, his body tense with anticipation. As he turned the corner, he activated a hidden transmitter embedded in his wristband. A soft beep sounded, followed by a brief moment of silence. Then, the lights above him flickered, and the emergency alarms began to blare. "Breach detected. All units to lockdown zones. Containment protocols activated." A loud crash echoed down the hallway behind him, signaling the first sign of chaos. The Zhoron soldiers had been tricked into thinking the intruders had taken a different route, and now they would be drawn toward the noise. Lucian's heart pounded as he made his way down the darkened corridor, his eyes scanning every shadow. Meanwhile, Gabriel, Mara, and the rest of the team had launched their own attack. Explosions rattled the facility's walls, and loud gunfire erupted as they clashed with Zhoron security forces. Lucian could hear the distant shouts and the unmistakable sound of combat. He reached the access shaft, a narrow opening leading up into the maintenance ducts. He could hear the rapid footsteps of soldiers behind him, but he didn't stop. He climbed the shaft quickly, his hands and feet finding purchase on the cold metal walls. The noise from the battle outside grew louder, and he knew their time was running out. At the top of the shaft, he could hear the sound of a Zhoron patrol closing in. He reached the hatch, forcing it open with a loud creak. The hangar stretched out before him, barely illuminated by the emergency lights, and across the room stood the extraction team, their ship idling and ready to go. "Get in!" a voice called from the shadows. Lucian didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the ship, his heart in his throat. The sound of pursuing footsteps echoed behind him. The door to the ship slid open just as the Zhoron soldiers rounded the corner. "Go! Go! Go!" Gabriel shouted. Lucian dove into the ship as the hatch slammed shut behind him. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot into the air, narrowly escaping the confines of the Zhoron facility. Lucian slumped into the seat, his body exhausted but his mind racing. They had made it. Against all odds, they had made it. The data was safely in their hands, and now the world would know the truth. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, the blue and green orb of Earth fading into the distance, Lucian turned to face Elyra, Gabriel, and the rest of the team. "We did it," he said quietly. "But this isn't over. The Zhoron will come for us. And we will fight. Together." Gabriel clapped him on the shoulder. "You're one of us now, Lucian. There's no going back." Lucian nodded, a sense of resolve filling him. He had found his place. He had made the right choice. The battle for humanity's future was just beginning, and he would fight with everything he had to ensure they didn't lose. The resistance had a chance, and Lucian was ready to lead them into the final stand.